So, I recently watched the movie Interstellar, and it was amazing. I mean, those kinds of long distance space adventures just seem so real and possible. Like, that could be our future. But there are some factors we have to consider so that we prioritize our astronauts' safety and health in future long term explorations. Several factors make space different from Earth, but we'll focus on space radiation. I'm sure most of us are familiar with radiation, like UV rays, an example of non ionizing radiation, which means its low energy particles can be shielded off fairly easily. Or X rays, which is an example of ionizing radiation, meaning its particles have enough energy to go through and damage substances, which makes them more difficult to shield and more dangerous than non ionizing radiation. A type of radiation exists in space called space radiation, which is composed of particles in Earth's magnetic field, particles from solar flares, and galactic cosmic rays. Space radiation is a type of ionizing radiation, so it can be dangerous. Think of it this way. If you throw a paper ball at a machine, it'll be fine. But if you throw a sharp rock or something, it'll damage the stuff in the machine and now it won't function properly. In the same way, ionizing radiation can damage our cells. Our cells store DNA, which is basically like the instructions page for the production of proteins, which serve numerous important purposes throughout our body. When water is exposed to ionizing radiation, it breaks down in a process known as water radiolysis, resulting in several species known as reactive oxygen species, the most abundant being hydroxyl radical, which is a neutral form of the hydroxide ion we commonly see. Hydroxyl radicals can damage our DNA by changing the specific chemical structures of nucleotides, which are the building blocks of DNA, resulting in genetic mutations. And if this happens, the DNA may not properly code for proteins needed for a cell to function properly. It's like someone messed up the instruction sheet. Here's a reason why it's important. So our cells go through a process called the cell cycle, where a cell basically replicates itself and splits into two identical daughter cells. Two parts of our genes keep the cell cycle under control: proto-oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes, each coding for specific proteins that have specific responsibilities. The proto-oncogenes drive a cell cycle forward, while the tumor suppressor genes act like a brake. If these genes are mutated, the cell cycle will be out of control since the specific proteins would not be produced in normal amounts. This can cause cells to divide and grow uncontrollably into larger tumors, an illness we know as cancer. Even on Earth, we aren't 100% safe from space radiation. However, the Earth's atmosphere and magnetic field help protect us from being exposed to this radiation. But when astronauts go on long distance space explorations, they no longer receive this protection and therefore are at a higher risk of illness, such as cancer, which is why it's important to consider the safety of our astronauts in future long term explorations.